The Met Office, that's the UK's National Weather Service, has issued a stark warning that the El Niño phenomenon currently developing over the Pacific Ocean is on track to be the strongest in living memory. In warmer cycles, El Niño would raise sea surface temperatures by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, with 2 degrees considered a really big event. This one, according to the current forecasts, could exceed 3 degrees when it peaks in November. Professor Adam Scaife, head of long-range forecasting at the Met Office, says he's never seen an El Niño signal this intense.
I've been involved in long-range forecasting for many years, and I have never seen an event like this in our forecasts. The tropical Pacific is warming faster than I've ever seen, and assuming the forecasts are correct, and we've got very high confidence at this stage, the El Niño is very slow developing. It takes many months, so we're pretty confident about the outcome. We think that when it peaks in November and December, it's likely to be a record event, unprecedented beyond anything we've seen in living memory.
Normally, the trade winds blow warm surface water from east to west across the Pacific, piling up warm water near Asia. Conversely, the cold, nutrient-rich water rises up off the coast of Peru. But during El Niño, the winds weaken and the warm water moves back east instead, warming the ocean's surface off the coast of South America, as our climate editor Justin Rowlatt will show you.
El Niño is one of the most important weather patterns on the planet, helping drive extreme weather around the world. Now, our globe, look at that, pretty impressive, eh? Shows the pattern of heat in the tropical Pacific Ocean. That is the engine room of El Niño. Now, at the end of last year, that's what we're showing here, it was still showing the impacts of El Niño's sister weather pattern, La Niña, which has a cooling effect. And you can see heat over there in the west, cooler temperatures over here in the east. Now, as we move into this year, look at that. The normal winds, the trade winds have weakened, on some occasions even reversed, allowing the warmer surface water to move eastwards across the Pacific. You can see it there building up off the coast of South America. Now, that is a classic sign of an impending El Niño.
Yeah, and as Justin suggests, this is not just a weather story. The El Niño phenomenon is already moving world markets, disrupting trade and reshaping our global food supplies. Take the Panama Canal. The drought tied to El Niño has lowered the lake that feeds it, so ships are now limited in how much cargo they can carry and how many can pass each day. That means longer queues, higher shipping costs, the sort of delays that ripple through the supply chain. In Peru, those warmer coastal waters are cutting off the cold, nutrient-rich upwelling that the anchovy stocks depend on, which is hammering a fish meal industry that the world depends on. Across Southeast Asia, suppressed monsoon rains are threatening palm oil and rice harvests. Australia is braced for drought. The ripple effects hit supermarket shelves everywhere. Coffee, cocoa, sugar prices have all seen sharp swings tied to the El Niño phenomenon in Brazil and West Africa. So let's bring in then our environment correspondent, Matt McGrath. So we can see that it's already starting to have an effect, Matt. Spell out for us what sort of changes we can start to see across the globe as we go into the autumn and the winter.
Christian, it's just been 2 months since we officially declared, an official El Niño was declared, and in that time period the temperatures and the waters have gone from about 0.5 degree above normal to 2 degrees now, heading for 3 according to the Met Office. Some forecasts even put them as high as 4 degrees, and they're all sitting on waters that deep in the oceans are maybe 8 degrees above normal. So that's the kind of scenario in which this El Niño is happening. The impacts, as you've touched on, are global. The bigger ones, the overwhelming perhaps impact over all this will be potentially a record warm year in 2027. That's what's happened in previous El Niños in 1998, in 2015 and in 2023. The next year tends to break world records as that heat comes out of the oceans. But you've touched on some of the impacts there in countries like Indonesia. All over Africa, we'll see parts of Ethiopia, very important for coffee crops, that could face a significant drought. South Africa, significant drought. Australia, higher risk of wildfires, higher risk of drought. Parts of South America experiencing more flooding. The patterns are different in different parts of the world, but we know that in a warmer world, these impacts from the naturally occurring El Niño event are actually much more devastating, much more impactful.
I'm struggling to understand the cause and effect, Matt. How much of what we're seeing here is the natural El Niño cycle, which comes around quite regularly, and how much of that is amplified by the underlying climate change?
Yeah, the big signal here, the big signal across the world really, and what we've seen throughout this summer in Europe, the UK and other parts of the world, is climate change, human-driven climate change, from the use of fossil fuels, from deforestation. That's the big lever here that's changing the world as we know it. But every few years we get this natural cycle occurring on top of that, which is the El Niño event, or La Niña when it's in its cooler phase. The El Niño event adds extra heat to the top of that, pushes us over the top, and that's where you get those really significant impacts on people's lives. The lack of food, potential queues for food and prices going up, potential impacts all around the world on things like, as you touched on with Indonesia, you know, the palm oil not growing, so people will face impacts on higher prices for cosmetics, soaps, very basic things, but food as well, coffee, all types of foodstuffs. Those are real impacts on real people around the world. In the temperature stakes, the big lever is climate change, but the El Niño adds that extra bit on top that puts us into record territory.
Matt McGrath, good to talk to you. Thank you for that. Well, Emma Howard-Boyd is the former head of the Environment Agency. She now heads the independent National Heat Risk Commission, which is based at the Grantham Research Institute. Thanks very much for being with us. What can British viewers expect then this autumn and winter, and how does that reconcile with the drought that we've had this summer?
Well, just to start off with, the warning that we've heard from the Met Office today is just incredibly stark and really does mean that we have to pay attention. They're normally quite conservative in terms of what they say, so to paint it so strongly, what we might be facing around the world, but also specifically in the UK, means that we all need to sit back and listen. Specifically this autumn, they're talking about a wetter autumn into October, November. When I heard Adam Scaife talk earlier this morning, he didn't want to go any further into the forecasting, but I think on the back of the summer that we've experienced with extreme heat and drought, where the Met Office is saying that we could be facing the hottest year on record next year, we also need to be mindful of the impacts that we might face in this country then. But what we do have is this window of opportunity in advance of the weather that we might start experiencing this autumn to get ready, particularly given some of our flood embankments have been pounded only last December and January from flooding, and then possibly dried out during the summer. So there is an opportunity for organisations like the Environment Agencies and others across the country to inspect, but also for communities to start understanding what we need to do to get prepared.
I mean, at the moment, of course, we've got bone dry hillsides and floodplains. What happens when you dump enormous amounts of water on that?
Well, the water doesn't soak into the land in the same way. So where organisations like the Environment Agency have been highlighting how much more surface water flooding we might experience, this is another way that we could see those storms manifest this autumn. I think when the Prime Minister led COBRA last week around the wildfires, I think he got a briefing about El Niño, and we now at every level of government, but every department, have an opportunity to look at this from a health risk, from an economic risk, from a security risk, particularly the food security angles that you were highlighting in this introduction. This will impact people's pockets too as prices rise from a food perspective. So a lot for us to think about and get ready for. And I also think this is an opportunity for mayors across the country to also get ready because they are closer to the communities that are going to get affected.
We're braced for more wet weather. We've seen some unprecedented flooding in Western Europe in recent years. You can think back to the huge floods that we saw in the early part of the year in southwest France a couple of years ago. Incredible floods around Valencia. They're enormously costly, these flooding incidents. Should we expect more of that across Europe this autumn?
I think that's what the forecasters are predicting, and this is where the government has been investing in flood defences across the country. But again, we need to think more broadly than the flood defences, also think about how our infrastructure is impacted by flood events. Only earlier this week, Network Rail was talking about the rainfall events that we've been having over the last couple of days and how that can impact transport infrastructure. So really thinking carefully about how we get prepared and that people understand where to go if flooding happens at speed.
It cost the French government around €1 billion, the flooding in February this year. I get a sense, do you, that this is really rising up the agenda for governments? Because, you know, if you're rolling from one of those cycles to another, it becomes enormously expensive for European economies.
Yes, and this is where, in seeing our investment in adaptation and resilience as a priority, getting ahead of the emergency events, thinking about this strategically, and every plan that our government has to invest in our schools, our hospitals, our transport networks, that infrastructure, making sure that we are locking in and making a core duty and responsibility for locking in climate resilience is one way that we can then work with investors, work with the private sector to know what we are aiming for over the years to come.